You know that feeling where somehow out of nowhere, you've been on a roll, you've been making really great paintings, and then somehow one day you just wind up in a rut. And whatever you do, it feels like you are stuck there. And you don't know what brought this on. Everything had been going really well, but suddenly one day it just feels like you're facing some kind of block with your painting practice. Nothing you make sounds exciting or reaches that level where you're really proud of it. Well, today I want to talk about what to do when that happens and how you can get yourself out of that place. As you watch through this video, if you find everything that I'm sharing helpful and you want to hear more about the mindset of mastering your craft as a painter, be sure to give this video a like, hit the subscribe button, and hit the bell icon so that you don't miss any new videos. I have new videos coming out every week. All right, so let's get into this. The first thing I want to say, if this feels even remotely relevant to you, is that this happens with everybody. And I think it's more likely to happen, honestly, the more advanced or experienced you are in your painting practice. And the reason I know this is that right as I was dealing with this myself, I had another painter friend who is really accomplished, whose work you probably really know and enjoy, share that he was dealing with the exact same thing. This question of how to bounce back when you've made a bad painting or you feel like you are in a rut with your paintings. So I do not want you to feel like if this is happening to you, that it's a sign that somehow you aren't meant to be doing this or you just need to get better, or maybe your internal monologue is that you aren't good enough and that's why this is happening. And that could not be farther from the truth. Okay, so before we jump into how to recover from this, I want to briefly touch on some reasons why this can happen. And I think there are two main factors that precipitate this. One, I think, is that this can happen when you are really constantly focused on challenging yourself and trying something new. Even if you're doing a really good job of setting yourself up for success, pushing yourself and making paintings that feel increasingly challenging or that are constantly pushing yourself, that can have a serious mental drain. Like, you can start to really associate the task of painting with really demanding, draining, or exhausting mental work. And naturally, over time, your mind is going to adapt to that by, treating it like a really serious, heavy thing. And to protect yourself, your brain is going to really only want you to engage with this when you have the bandwidth and the capacity to give it the attention that it needs. So if this is you, I think one of the first things you can do is really intentionally take a step back and figure out what kinds of exercises would actually feel like a reset for you. So this is exactly what I encountered with this particular painting. So previously on some earlier YouTube videos this month, I was encountering this, and this painting that you're watching me make was the solution to that. So what this looked like in practice was I sat down to make a painting for this YouTube channel, and I was probably, maybe 4 hours in, and I just realized I could not visualize what the final painting should look like. And that was a huge red flag that I wish I had realized sooner. And this ties into the other main factor that I think can precipitate this kind of block that we'll talk about in just a moment. So I gave that painting my all, realized I had a problem, and then basically admitted defeat. I put that painting aside and I started a new painting that I thought I could probably bust out pretty quickly and easily. But I was feeling the deadline of getting this done in time for a YouTube video, which also did not set me up for success. In periods where you're dealing with block, I think it's really, really important to be mindful of what external pressures are weighing on you, especially in terms of something like a deadline, or maybe you're working on a commissioned painting, or maybe you're working on a painting for an assignment for school and you have to have it in by a certain time. Those kinds of things, in my experience, really actively aggravate this situation, and I definitely found that to be the case for me. And the way this showed up for me was that the second painting that I tried to make, I was not set up for success on it either. I had a similar problem of not being able to entirely visualize what the final piece would look like. I did choose a subject that I thought would be a little bit easier for me to paint, something that's typically pretty relaxing. So I did take a step in a positive direction, but the problem I ran into with that particular piece was that I chose a reference that just wasn't very good. It was shot with my iPhone, not with my good camera that's actually like pretty great for reference. And it was shot in pretty poor light. So I didn't have a lot of good color and light information on top of just it not being a very high quality photo in general to be able to paint from. And in case you're curious, the previous painting that I first tried for this piece was a full like equestrian painting. So it was a horse with a rider like galloping through a field, which is a little bit different from what you see me typically paint. Like typically I am not interested in full figures. I'm typically more of a portrait painter, so that's where my comfort zone is. And it had a full, very involved, complex background, which is also not what you typically see from me. So that was basically the first horseman, no pun intended, of this not working out for me. And then the second reference I chose, I reflected on the fact that I'm a portrait painter and I was choosing to do this figurative piece that had a really involved background. And I said, okay, I'm going to choose a photo of just a horse's face. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to abstract that background, and that should be easier. Well, in feeling rushed to go ahead and figure out what I was going to paint, I chose a reference that I should have been able to see from the outset really wasn't high enough quality. So it did check off some important boxes, but it still really wasn't where it needed to be. And this is exactly what I'm talking about when I suggest that, we're kind of deviating from the process that we know sets us up for success. So if you've been listening to my videos for any length of time, you will know that I am a really firm advocate for having as clear and articulated of a painting process as possible. So that means being really clear on your goal, understanding what needs to be happening in one of your own paintings to make it a painting that aligns with your goals. So like, what kind of composition do you need? What kind of lighting? What kind of color? What subjects? What kind of background? What compositional flow? That is super, super important. And from there, it is really helpful, it is critical even, to give yourself the space to really develop the skills with those kinds of paintings before you throw yourself in the deep end and think about making a complete painting that you're going to share with the world versus just a painting exercise. And this was really, I think, one of my major problems here was that maybe it was out of hubris, maybe it was out of complacency, I'm not sure which, but I just thought, well, I've painted horses long enough. I've done some figurative pieces of horses. I painted horses with backgrounds before. Even though it's not my main focus, I should just be able to take this reference and wing it and figure it out. And what I really should have done was to do some exercises where I did master studies of these horses, where I did anatomy studies. I should have done some exercises where I really grappled with what I wanted out of the backgrounds of these paintings. And I didn't do those things. I didn't follow through on that process for setting myself up for success and being able to really make sure that all of my skills matched the kind of painting I wanted to make. And I see this over and over again with painters where you're kind of expecting yourself to be able to make a painting that has all of these components that you've never even practiced before. Thankfully, there is a way that we can break this down and build you up to them. But as you can tell, even when you know that that's important, sometimes, whether it's laziness or just not thinking through the process or whatever you want to call it, even when we know better, we sometimes skip over this. And that is what happened to me. So I put those other two paintings aside. The first one wasn't a fit because I hadn't put in the practice necessary to set myself up for success with it. The second one wasn't a fit because I felt rushed and I tried to work off of a reference that I knew wouldn't work. I was just hoping I would pull off a miracle, and then after probably 45 minutes of painting, I realized this just wasn't going to happen, and it wasn't fair to try and expect it to magically work out. Now, if you're new to the channel and you haven't heard me talk about this before, I'll go ahead and link some videos that give you more insights into what this breakdown actually is in terms of getting clear on your goal, being able to set yourself up for success with reference, making sure you have the time dedicated to skill building in order to set yourself up for success. If you're curious what that actually looks like in practice, definitely save those links and check those out after you watch through this video. So from here, let's go ahead and talk about what I did to set myself up for success with this painting and what this painting represents in terms of what you can do to mitigate this feeling of block or to effectively rebound from a frustrating painting or a painting that you give up on or just a painting that did not meet your expectations. So here were the things that I thought about when I sat down to work on this painting. First and foremost, I had to get rid of the YouTube deadline concern. I just went ahead, I took a look at some footage that I had been saving for something else, and I just made sure that I wasn't under that pressure. Because I think what can happen when we feel stumped like this is that it's kind of like we get in a situation where it's don't think about pink elephants. And that's all you want to do. When I'm feeling blocked, my mind isn't filled with how to fix it and how to make a painting I really like. My mind gets filled up with, well, you have to have the painting done by this time so that you can get the video edited and get it out in time. Which is important, but it does get in the way of actively connecting with the painting process and getting in flow and enjoying what I make. And that's really the antidote to all of this. If you're feeling blocked, the solution is to figure out what you would just enjoy. And that's what this painting was. So after I solved the YouTube deadline problem, actually the second thing I did was I talked to some of my friends about it. And the artist friend that I mentioned who was also dealing with how to bounce back after you make a painting that you're not happy with, that just made me feel like, okay, this is part of the process, no matter who you are or what level you're at. I shouldn't read into why this happened, other than to figure out what about my process could set me up to enjoy it more and to be more successful with it. Not reading into it anything about what this says about me as a painter. And I think that's really easy to do. Even when you're me and you make whole YouTube videos about these kinds of topics. So I would say step 2 is to do what you can to remind yourself that this is normal. It's normal no matter what stage in the game you're at. And if you're going to read anything into it, maybe reflect on what didn't set you up for success with that painting so that you know how to be more successful next time, how to set yourself up for success next time. And then from there, the next thing that I did was I really just sat down and gave myself some space to connect with the feeling of just being in flow with my paintings. And the more I thought about this, the more I thought about what feeling I wanted to feel, what attitude I wanted to feel, how much did I want to be working or concentrating or pushing myself versus relaxing and playing and just trying things. And I realized that at this stage, I really just wanted to play and try things and relax. And the more I thought about that, the more I realized that for whatever reason, right now, this kind of portrait felt like it would be the thing that would set me up for that. So I went ahead, I looked through my reference library that I have on my computer. So I didn't have to do any super hard work to go out and get a reference in the moment. And I looked through and I looked for something that I thought would feel like kind of that sweet spot between an interesting portrait that for me engages me and feels like it tells a story without being super complicated or having elements to it that I knew would frustrate me. So no complex background, no annoying anatomical features like hands, nothing like that. I knew I just wanted to really jump into the face and explore how I could build this painting up from the drawing. And I'm at the point where with faces, I feel like I can kind of play and explore and push and not be super rigid in my process. That's not true for every subject. So for me, I chose a subject that felt comfortable and natural and that I had already put in the work to get to that place with. And even if you don't quite feel like you have a particular subject or style or composition that meets those criteria, I would encourage you to think about the thing that brings you closest to it and really just spend time imagining what kind of painting would just put me in a relaxing, fun, playful mood. And then I think the final piece to this puzzle is that I did something that I've been talking about a lot more recently on this channel, which is I painted with people. So I didn't even have people who were painting with me in person. I had some friends on Discord and I said hey, do you want to all virtually paint together and chat while we paint? And just having that little bit of company and being surrounded by other painters while I worked on this, that was a really significant boost. Even when I reached places in this painting that felt a little tricky, a little frustrating, or I wasn't quite sure how to solve certain problems in it, I could focus on the fact that I was enjoying time with my friends rather than getting mired in, the headspace of feeling stuck with those things. Every painter is different. You might have a different relationship with painting with other people than I do, but I found that this was an environmental factor that really puts me in a good headspace. Some other things I enjoy are listening to audiobooks or podcasts while I paint. For you, it might be listening to your favorite band or something like that. But whatever the case may be, whether it's a little ritual around like lighting a candle or like listening to something while you paint or being with other people, that final factor of just things that are beyond the painting itself that set you up to enjoy that time, I think are really helpful in getting you back in the studio and back in the groove. All right. And this is how I used this painting to help bounce back from a couple of paintings that were very frustrating and unsuccessful. So I hope that you can take all of these tips back with you into your own studio practice. If you want even more in-depth help to make sure that you're reaching your really big painting goals and you have support when you do get stuck so that you bounce back as quick as possible and you stay on track, I have a free masterclass in the description that is all about how I help artists to do this. And if you already know that you're interested in mentorship, you can also reach out directly to me via the link in the description. All right, until next time, happy painting.